Okay. All right, then let me do this here. I went I went back and I looked at I thought we'd talk a little bit about roads tonight and some of the issues there. That seems to be always popping up. And I went back to I had done a uh, presentation to the North Dakota Stockmen's Association back in 2017. I can't believe it's already been that long ago, because they asked me about coming to the Stockmen's Association convention and talk about fences on roads. And so I don't necessarily need to talk about that tonight, but I thought, well, some of the slides in here were pretty good ones, I thought. And so, the always issue is what exactly about section lines and how does all that work? So um, here's the law here. Um, Section 240703 of the Century Code says that, section lines are considered public roads open for public travel, 33 feet either side. Okay, so that's what we know about section lines. And and the state statute, the second bullet point there, provides the public with an unconditional 66-foot easement. And the statute's been interpreted by some attorney generals. I think I have it a little later in these slides. But those two sections right there are pretty important for us to remember, in that sometimes we have to educate people about that. This checkerboard deal we've got in the state, every mile there's that 66-foot wide easement, whether there's a road there or not. And that goes all the way from basically the Mississippi River to the Pacific Ocean, all the way from the Canadian border down to the southern border. So it's a pretty widespread. You get out to the East Coast of New England, they don't have this, but since that 1840 timeframe, that's kind of when most of that kind of stuff started. So that's kind of where we at, and that's kind of what we need to try to remember. And then I had some slides. I had some issues on how townships were set up. We all know that. Why 66 feet? Little history here, and you can win beer and bar trivia on this one. Distances were measured in chains, okay, and lengths, and based upon Sir Edmund Gunter's 66-foot measuring chain, a chain, an actual metal chain made up of 100 links, each being 7.92 inches long. 80 chains constitute a mile. So I suppose if you multiplied 7.92 inches times 100, you'd get what, 792 inches. Multiply that by 80, you'd get a whole bunch of inches. And if you did the work, you'd probably come up with 5,280 feet. So it all kind of made sense to those old surveyors. So, but that's the reason for 66 feet, which of course we know is 4 rods wide. Okay. So then, as time went on, starting in Ohio in 1814, federal government says we should have 33 feet along section lines as public easements. Okay, and that was kind of somehow where some of the states got going to that. And then you want to fast forward to 1889, then of course the North Dakota adopted that, and I'm sorry, 1866, Congress allowed for roads on these publics, and then in 1889, here we go, the state law included these section line right-of-way codes. It was included in the first blast of the Century Code in 1895. So that's how long the section lines have been around. They've been around basically for late 1700s, but in this state, of course, starting in 1889. So it's been there. It's nothing new. It's been there forever, really, in our state. It's been there forever, and it is that 66-foot right-of-way every mile. And once again, this is that slide we saw earlier. Okay, considered public roads, open for public travel, and it's been interpreted by the state attorney general. Okay. This one here, the Board of Township Supervisors have general jurisdiction over the roads, highways, and bridges throughout the township. General supervision. Now, bridges, of course, are county's jurisdiction. So that authority has been, Yeah, it's supervision, but the authority for bridges is on the county side. But this is the statute that gives you as township supervisors the authority over the roads. Sometimes we get that question, we get a supervisor or a chairman that calls and says they got somebody grinching at them about a road, and the offending person will say, well, what gives you the right to tell me what I can do here with this road? Well, there it is. The state law says supervisors have the general jurisdiction. Okay. Let me skip a couple slides here. I was here's that fence line stuff. I'm gonna get out of that. And this slide here is something that we sometimes make a mistake on, and people need to remember this. What's the difference between a section line and a section line road? Okay. The section line is that imaginary line, 33 feet either side, whether there's a road there or not. Now that's pretty important. Sometimes, you'll ask people, I'll say, they're talking to me about a road, and I'll say, is it a section line? No, there's no road there. Well, I get that, but the section line is there, whether there's, it's imaginary line, but it's every mile, and that 66 foot is there for every mile. So sometimes there's a road there, sometimes there's not. We've got 50,000+ miles of township road in the state. Most of them are constructed on section lines. That's why the section lines are there. So doesn't matter if there's a road or not. That's number one. Doesn't matter if there's a road. There's still a section line there of which townships are involved and have supervision over. Obviously, unless it's a county road or a state road, then of course those groups would have them. But in the township, doesn't matter if there's a road or not, you've got jurisdiction over that. Okay. One of the things sometimes it gives us fits is that second bullet point. Sometimes the road is not necessarily centered. So sometimes we'll hear people say, well, I measured 33 feet either side from the center of the road, which is generally a pretty good way to do it. But sometimes the road's offset a little bit. That was, they had 66 feet to build a road, so they could put it over here, they could put it over there, anywhere within, because those early roads, the horse and buggy days, they weren't very wide, so they would put a path down within that 66 feet. And then of course we come along later and rebuild those things. Well, sometimes they're not necessarily centered. So got to be a little careful sometimes when you're dealing with fences or you're dealing with that 33-foot line from a boundary standpoint. Where exactly is it? It may not necessarily be from the center of the road. It could be offset a little bit. Usually not by much, but it could be. So, and now with GPS systems, of course, it's a little easier to find that than maybe in the older days when you had to do regular surveys. Who can close the road? Okay. Townships and counties can close the road. There's a difference between closing the road and closing the imaginary line. Some people get mixed that up. The road can be closed, but the line doesn't go. The line is still there, still a 66-foot right of way. And, we close roads because they're underwater. There's a drop off, there's a washout, so you have the authority to close the road, but the imaginary line is still there. If you need to get rid of the imaginary line, that's county commissioners can do that. They're the only ones that have the authority to do that. That's an extraordinary thing to do, because when I say that, because if the county commission actually get rid of the imaginary line, then the right of way goes away too. And that goes back to the adjacent landowner. And why is that important? Well, in the future, we want to build a road there. Well, if the imaginary line has been abandoned, the right of way is gone. You'd have to buy the right of way back to build the road. So NDTOA went on record years ago that saying that we would like not to see section lines abandoned because of that reason, because you never know when you might need it. And that was the whole point of the section line provisions in statehood anyway, and really from the Homestead Act was when we started settling out here, they wanted to be able to build a road without having to buy right away. And so that's where the right of way got to be automatic, and that's where it came from. So we want to try to preserve that as much as possible. So what else have I got? I think that might have finished those slides. I wrote down some issues here. Here we go. What I call road issues. Obstacle clearance is one that we get lots and lots of questions about. Okay. We also get questions about who gets to use the right of way, and then of course our old friend the maintenance side of it too. So obstacle clearance first. We're responsible because that section line is open to the public, and because that section line probably has a road on it, then we know people are going to drive it, and the public have the right to use it. And so we have an obligation to make that road as safe as we possibly can without building an interstate highway, of course. So what does that mean? Well, you have obstacles in the ditch or obstacles within the roadway. And of course, the ditch is part of the roadway, it's part of the right of way. And so if you got all that stuff out there, trees, bales, rocks, junk cars, growing crops, all that stuff is a potential obstacle for the traveling public. So, and some people say, well, what the heck's a guy doing hitting a tree anyway? It's in the ditch. Well, yeah, but things happen. You blow a tire, or all of a sudden you meet somebody, two cars meeting, the guy you're meeting is going 90 miles an hour. It's his fault, but he forced me into the ditch and I ran into a bale, okay. So, that's the kind of thing we got to be concerned about. So obviously some obstacles. For example, we're gonna bale the ditch. We got bales there, but we ought not to leave them there for 6 months. We got to get them out of there. Probably don't have to get them the day after we bale them, but we probably don't want to leave them there for a year and a half either. So you got to use some common sense here. Obviously, if there's a junk car in the ditch, well, we got to get that thing out of there. Um, Trees, of course, is always a common problem. When we got trees growing in the ditch, what do we do with them? Well, the time to get rid of a tree is when they're this size right here, when they're that size, because a mower will get that. But when you get a tree that's this size, well, now that mower is not going to work anymore. So obviously somebody's been asleep at the switch, and we're not mowing the ditches. And that's how that tree got to be so big. So can you remove those? Yes, you can. It's an obstacle, and you have the obligation really to remove them. And so you can go in and take them out. Can you charge against taxes? Yes, with notice. You have to give the landowner notice that you're going to take those trees out, and then you're going to charge them. Okay. And you have to give the landowner the opportunity to take those trees out him or herself, so that they don't have to incur that cost. The problem with, if you get somebody that's going to be fight you on that, and the problem that they're not going to take them out, so you go ahead and take them out yourself as a township, what are we going to do with them? Because you just can't pile them on his or her land, because now that's outside the 33 feet. So you got to get permission to do that. So that's why you've heard me say over the past, maybe you can make a deal with the landowner and go halvesies. We'll come in and take them out if you'll let us pile them on your ground. And that's worth a lot to the township, because otherwise you got to carry those things away, and that's going to cost you money. So if you can get an agreement that we can pile that stuff on the landowner's land, that's worth some money to you. So if you can go thirdsies or halvesies or however you want to do it. Um, a lot of times, landowners, especially the absentees, they don't have the wherewithal, or they don't have the equipment to do it, and they don't know anybody that can help them do it. So sometimes if the township can broker a deal and broker this and maybe get a contractor to help you or whatever, you can maybe share the cost. The point is, you want to try to get that stuff out of the ditch, and because it gets to be a problem for the township from a liability standpoint. And like I said, the time to get rid of those trees is when they're this size. You can cut them with a mower and you don't have to deal with it. So um, growing crops, is that an obstacle? Yeah, it is. It is. And it's and you'll see my second point down there, farming the right of way. we see people farming the right of way. Is that wrong? No, it isn't. In fact, typically with field roads and things like that, where you don't really have a built-up road, we encourage people to farm the right of way because that helps for weed clearance and weed control and all that. Problem is that we're farming the right of way, and that's the public has the right to use that. So if you have a crop growing in the right of way and some jerk comes along and drives down the crop, can they do that? Well, probably so. There's a jerk, but they probably can because they're driving on the right of way and you're farming the right of way. So you just got to make sure you educate the guys about that and just say, okay, we want you to farm the right of way because it's a dirt road and weed control all that, but just be aware that you are farming the right of way and you may not be able to get that crop. Hopefully that's not going to work, okay? But that's not going to happen. Where I look at growing crops being an obstacle is when you have a good built up road and you got corn right in the bottom of the ditch. Okay. And so you come up to the intersection and you can't see around because you got corn right there. It's obviously out within the 33 feet. So, that can be a dangerous obstacle. Obviously if you run into it, it's not going to hurt much, but you can't see around it, you can't see what's coming, especially in a busy intersection. So you want to try to educate your operators, say, don't be planting that corn in the ditch because we're going to have to go and cut it down. And they'll fuss and they'll stew about that and they'll say, yeah, we have the right to move because it's within the right of way and it's an obstacle and we got to get rid of it. So better just to plant back, especially in a busy intersection, just plant it back so you get it out of the way so we don't have to worry about sight lines and visibility. And of course, they ought not to be planting in a ditch anyway. If you got a good built up road, good top on it, and you got a good ditch there, don't be planting in the ditch because that just causes erosion, and you got water problems, and you got issues. So just don't let them do that. And then again, the guys will fuss and they'll stew about that and they'll say, well, we pay taxes to I get that. I understand all that, but there's a 66 foot, there's a 33 foot either side of the section line. That's a public easement. And if you have if you have a fairly decent road with some traffic, don't be planting in the right of way because it's a problem. So you got to educate these guys sometimes. Um, Farming the right of way from a usage standpoint. So let me drop down to that because sometimes we get involved with utilities they want to bury cables and above ground and underground fiber optic. Been a lot of fiber optic work this year because there was some federal money available for some of these telephone companies to do that. So there's been a lot of fiber optic buried. That's where that stuff's supposed to go, is in the right of way. In my opinion, that's where it's supposed to go, not out in the field, And so if it's above ground, of course, that's where we like to have zoning. We like to have setbacks so that you don't have a highline pole at 34 feet. Technically, that's okay, but it's an obstacle. It really is, and it's a snow catcher. So that's where that zoning comes in and say, if you're going to have any power lines, just get them out of the way. Just get them out 50 feet, 75 feet. And I understand it's a pain in the butt to have to farm around them. I get that, but still, you got to look at the safety and from a snow removal standpoint, you got to look at that. But the issues with utility lines, the issue of that should be there's a couple things you got to look at here. They ought not to be putting that in your right of way without your permission. There's a general rule here. Nobody should work in my right of way without my permission. Nobody should work in my road without my permission. Okay? Township permission. Okay. Now, obviously, if we're going to put a water line or we're going to power or cable something in the ditch, that's where they're supposed to go. That permission should be freely given. What are going to be the conditions? Well, it's got to be buried deep enough. Okay. And that's going to vary from place to place, but we want to have it buried deep enough so we're not digging it back up again every time we make a pass. Although we shouldn't be farming the ditch again, of course. And we should have an agreement that says if you need to do some maintenance on this cable, power, water line power, whatever it is, then you utility company, you're going to be responsible for fixing any damage, and you're going to be responsible to make sure that once you're done with doing your work, that you put the ditch and the road back to the shape of what it used to be. It was before we started. Okay. And you probably want to talk about the placement of that. And we don't want to have it right on the edge of right on the edge of the road surface, up on top of the insule. We don't want that. We want to get it out, get it away. Okay, but you can use the right of way, but get it away and get it deep enough, and then have a maintenance agreement in place. All this stuff should be in writing, of course, and and I've seen several permits that the various townships have come up with, and you can be creative on this, but should have a document that people sign that lays out those conditions so that the person sitting in the chair after you can go to that and say, well, okay, REA, you put in this cable 17 years ago and you agreed at that time that it had to do some work, that you'd fix it. Well, there it is. You got a piece of paper that says that. So it's good to do that. Uh, Talk about farming the right of way again. There again, that should be done with permission. And it should be done on from a limited type of a scenario where, you're only going to allow that when you have those field level roads, I think. Prairie trails, I suppose you could do that, but you want to do that where you don't have a lot of traffic. And the classic is the field road, which is just level with the field, and you got a trail down there. It's dirt, and probably you use it in the spring and the fall for the farmers, and maybe the hunters will drive down there once in a while. You might have a car going there once a month or something like that. But it's those kind of roads. That's where we kind of say, okay, go ahead and farm the right of way. But it's done with permission, and some I've heard that. Well, we've been farming that for the last 40 years. We're grandfathered. No, we're not that's got to be a year-to-year deal. And like, obviously, maybe you don't talk about it. But there again, the operator, the farmer's got to understand, I am farming the right of way, and at any time, the township could tell me I can't do that. I can't tell you how many times over the years that we've had that question where all of a sudden somebody wants to build a house, and all of a sudden they want to build the road up, and they're going to agree to pay for it. Well, that's where it's going to go. And so all of a sudden the guy that's been farming the right of way can't farm the right of way because now we got a bigger road there. Well, they got to be made to understand that that's the deal. That's the deal. It's the same with fences. If you want to put a fence close to the edge of the road, okay, we can allow that, but you may have to remove it. There again, it's got to be done with permission. No such thing as a grandfathered fence. That permission can be taken away at any given time. So before I get to the maintenance side, then I had a real good scenario here the other day. In fact, I think it was just today, where we had it was a dairy. One of the proposed dairies is that they were talking about putting a whole. Let me back up. Those dairies, they're when they talk about manure removal, they're talking about pumping, liquefying the manure and pumping it out onto to various fields where the farmers have agreed to take the manure. Kind of a good way to get rid of it, I guess. And so they liquefy it and they pump it through a pipe, and it goes. So this township, they were talking to me about the dairy was talking about putting down a temporary hose, and using and pumping it to whatever some central point, and then from there it would go out to the various fields. So it was a temporary hose that was going to lay on top of the right of way, lay on next to the road, and it was obviously a field road. So then the question was, who's got priority? The guy that's farming the right of way, or the guy that wants to put the hose in? And that's a good question. When I think about it, both of those parties would be able to use the right of way with permission. And so the guy that's farming the right of way with permission, now all of a sudden we're going to give the dairy the permission to put their hose down on top of the crop. Well, that could give rise. So I guess what I told him, I said, maybe what you need to do is is make an agreement that the guy that's going to farm the right of way, he has a 1-year deal, and you agree that you won't allow anybody hoses to be laid on his crop. That way you have an agreement in place with it, and the dairy would have to honor that. Or right, vice versa. We'll let you use the hose, and the guy can't be planting the right of way side. Those are the kind of questions that kind of come up sometimes. But so anytime you're farming the right of way, it always gives rise to potential problems. But sometimes we want it to happen. On the maintenance side, then we deal with the pardon the pun, but there's a fork in the road here. Is it an improved road or is it an unimproved? Okay, is it an improved section line or an unimproved section line? And we hear these terms, a good road. We have a good road, and we have a prairie trail. We got a field road. We got no trail at all. The term prairie trail does not exist in the law. Okay, but we all know what it is. Okay, it does not exist in the law. Neither does a field road. In our law, either it's a road or it isn't. Okay, either it's a road or it isn't. And even if it isn't a road, there's still a 66-foot right of way there. There always is. So. The Supreme Court has talked about unimproved section lines, okay, and so that could be a prairie trail, could be a field road, but it's probably not. It's probably not a quote unquote good road because that's been constructed and that's within our road system. What's our obligation? Okay, do we have to blow snow? No. Do we have to put down gravel? No. Do we have to do anything? Well, now it starts to be a little dicey. We don't have to blow snow. No, we don't have to. But why do we? We do because it's I call it a political question. You have people living, you have people working, you have people farming. They obviously want to have those roads open. And so that's one of the things that townships do. We're going to try to keep a road system open. That's one of our jobs. So to keep the road system open, we have to do some snow removal. Okay. We don't have to put gravel down? No, we don't have to put gravel down, but there again, the people want a good road system, so they're our bosses, and so they're paying tax. We want you in our budget to budget for some gravel. Okay, so that's why we do that. What about other maintenance? Well, our obligation is to maintain these roads so that they're safe, okay, reasonably safe. And that might mean gravel, that might mean snow removal, that might mean a combination, it might mean paving, asphalting, and I never know. We have to do what we need to do to make it safe. What about these others, the prairie trails and the field roads and those? If it's an unimproved section line, meaning basically no road, then it can't have any known hazards. Okay. So a dirt road, don't have to do anything with it. You don't have to, but you got, what's a known hazard? Well, a tree growing in the middle of the road, middle of the field road, that's a hazard, so we know about it. So we probably need to get it removed. A rock pile, that's where we dump rocks, is right in the middle between two sections, and there's no road there. That's where we dump the rocks because it's the boundary between the two sections. Problem is, we piling those rocks in the right of way. That's a known hazard. And eventually you start seeing a trail, you start seeing people driving back and forth, even though it's a dirt road, quote unquote, it's on an unimproved section line. We have obstacle clearance requirements there. That should get rid of that rock pile. You got a washout. Okay. Do we have to go? No, well, we got to do something. We got to fill it in so that we don't have a drop off. So if some car coming along at midnight in a foggy night took a wrong turn, ends up with their nose of the car down on a drop off. Well, we knew about that, and we don't have to make an interstate highway, but we got to make sure it's safe, and so we got to fill that in. Well, what happens when it washes out every year? Because okay, then maybe that's a candidate for closing that trail, putting Problem is, by doing that, now nobody can use it, so it's a really double-edged sword. So you just can't have known hazards on section lines. So So those are some of the points that we run across when we talk about roads and section lines and those kind of things. And so there's just a myriad of questions and all kinds of stuff you can talk about. So I'll pull that off and um, we can probably open it up for questions. I don't know if Larry's still on enough. Larry's got something to talk about or not, but I think Larry might have you maybe we're going to talk a bit about Measure 4 tonight, weren't you? I think. Larry, are you there? He's on the combine.
I'm here.
Were you going to talk a little bit about Measure 4 or not?
Well, uh, first of all, we do have a question from Mary, the chairman of Hay Creek Township, the most populous township in the state.
I see her there. I see her there. Yeah.
Uh,
What's her question? Did she chat? Did she chat with you, or is she going to tell us what the question is?
well, I see she's here. She can tell us herself.
Okay, Mary, what you got?
Hi, everybody. Hi, Tom.
Hey,
We had a windstorm, of course, everybody did last weekend, and a large cottonwood fell down on a township road, and a lot of the neighbors got together and cut it up and pushed it off the road. And we also had another windstorm, I think it was in July, and had a large tree over a township road. And one of the officers called 911. I didn't think that was a good idea, but I just wondered normally what would be the best way to handle that if you get a call, say during the night or something, and a road is obstructed because of that.
and you're got a, you have a different situation because you got lots of people, and you got paved roads too, right?
We do.
Yeah. So, so she's, as Larry said, she's one of our, Hay Creek is right north of Bismarck, and it's one of our most popular, about 5,000 to 6,000 people, right? Isn't it? Lives there? Yeah.
Yes.
So it's a little bit of a different deal. So from the standpoint of my township, where we got 40 people living, and we got roads that nobody's going to drive on for the next 3 days, so but still, it's a hazard, it's a known hazard, and so uh you're worried about somebody running into that darn thing, that tree. So you'd have, I think the law would say you got to take reasonable steps to remove the obstacle. In your situation, because you've got lots of people and lots of traffic, I think that timeline gets pretty small for you, as opposed to maybe a township out in Julie's country where there's, you know, you may have 3 or 4 families, and you don't have a lot of traffic. So I think by the neighbors getting out there and working, that's good, and they probably got the road cleared, probably to pile the stuff out in the edge of the road. Probably is that what they did? So at least you get it off the roadway, but you still have an obstacle, and you're within your now. Of course, also she probably doesn't have that automatic 66-foot right of way because she's got almost like, it looks like a city street. So any idea what your right of way width is out there in some of those areas,
Uh,
Mary?
about 50.
Okay. Because that's part of a plot, basically it's a plotted, like it's a plotted subdivision. It's just the subdivision is huge. So sometimes those streets are on the plats. Sometimes they can be 25 feet, sometimes they can be 30, sometimes they can be 50. Some plats use the actual 66 feet. They did that too. So one of the things that I would tell her, and also other townships that have, for lack of a better word, subdivisions, um, take a look at the plat, the map, the plat map, and find out what kind of right of way do those streets have. Because if they're not on a section line, they're going to be different, and then you need to know that. And of course, one of the issues that we see people do is they'll just plant grass all the way up to the edge of the road, and they're probably on the right of way, probably are. Unless you got curb and gutter, then of course they're up to, but they're, again, most time curb and gutter is right on the edge of the right of way. So yeah, long answer to a short question here, but I think, you'd have to act within a reasonable time. What's that reasonable time? Pretty short period, I think. Calling 911, I don't know what they would do. What would 911 do? You know, they're not gonna come and remove the tree. Uh, you know, that would be, you know, I suppose maybe they were thinking to get the sheriff to come out to maybe put some markers up perhaps. Is that what they're thinking about maybe to do?
I think he was,
Yeah, yeah.
and they probably directed the call then back to the county shop, maybe.
Mm-hmm. And they would come in, they would come out and put up some warning signs or some lights or something like that, because it's pretty hard to, you know, it's pretty hard to believe you're not going to get somebody to come out at 3 o'clock in the morning with a chainsaw and start cutting that tree up, you know,
Right.
but you gotta wait for, so that might have been his idea, would be to get calling 911 to get go through the 911 to get to the sheriff. Okay, so the sheriff and the deputy could come out and do some marking, but you know, there again, that township's a little bit different than our typical, but there again, that's a township and they got to do what they got to do to take reasonable steps to protect the traveling public. And it sounds like that's what you did there. So you got. What else we got out there? Anybody else got something? If you know, and maybe you want to wait for a second, you can come back. But maybe Larry, you want to jump in and talk a little bit about Measure 4, because we're already at 8:45 here, I see. So, or 8:49. So we want to talk a little bit about that. Go ahead, and then we can come back to questions.
Okay, well, I'm not gonna tell you how to vote, but I'm gonna give you a concern that I see. Most people don't realize that townships do set their own levy, and most townships are levying less than half of what they could under state law. Now that what they levy is what would be replaced by Measure 4 if it did pass. But to get that funding to replace the levy would probably cost us all the other state funding that we're getting. The Operation Prairie Dog Fund, the Legacy Earnings Highway Township Fund, even the gas or the highway users fee that we get quarterly payments. Those could all go away just to replace the levy, and I see townships losing half of their funding under that scenario. That's a concern that I've got right now. I don't know if anybody else got anything to say on it.
So Larry, so you mean so say for example, a township, they're levying $10,000, let's just say that. And so if that $10,000 goes away from the property tax measure, if that passes, then that $10,000 would be replaced. We would get that from those funds that we're getting from the other areas that we're supposed to be getting anyway, right? Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Many of these townships that keep their levy so low are depending on the other state funds to fill out their funding and provide what they need to maintain their roads. And if that other funding goes away, they're going to be left with just the levied amount. So come up quite short in many cases.
And for those you know, we're kind of walking a fine line here in our discussions, because you know, we can't, as a Township Officers Association, we can't tell you how to vote on this. We obviously have a position that you can kind of figure out, but we just can't say, come out and say you need to vote yes or you need to vote no, because of that we can't be lobbying from that standpoint. But I think our job is to tell you what could happen, like Larry just did, and one of the things that surprises me a lot is when I talk to clerks and treasurers, or well, not clerks so much, because clerks typically are on the ball. But, well, they always, the clerks run the show, so, but those supervisors, sometimes, they're their own worst enemies. I'll ask them, what's your budget? Huh? How much money do you get in a year? Huh? What's your levy? Huh? They don't have a clue, so, and I always, you got to know that. You have to know that. You have to know, what does, if are you levying 18 mills? And if so, what kind of money does that bring in? And, they need to have a better handle. And I've talked to some supervisors over here. Well, I don't know where we get our money from. We just get, well, what are you talking about? Of course you do. You're getting it from your taxes, so. Because a lot of people think the taxes all go to the school. They don't understand that taxes go to the county, go to the school, go to the township, they go to the city, they go to the park boards, they go to the library boards, they go to the fire departments. That's where all these taxes, they get divided up. Obviously, the school and the county get most of it. That's sometimes where the frustration comes in, I think. But townships is the present company excluded all you people around on the call tonight, but there's some out there that just don't have a clue, and they need to get up to speed on that. So
I did have a comment I was gonna make, if it's okay. Um, Dr. Rick Becker is in Hay Creek Township. He is about a mile from my residence. And in the spring, I was putting together a chip seal estimate. And the engineer called me from the county and said, it looks like you've missed a little section that is about a quarter of a mile long, and it's right at the end of a road. And he says, it looks like there was a problem with the mapping, and I just wanted you to know that, and I wanted to see if you wanted to add that into your budget, and should we chip seal that also? And I said, where exactly is that at? So they pointed it out to me, and I looked at it, and it's directly in front of Rick Becker's home. So that area would have been missed and would not have been chip sealed. And thanks to our taxes, he was able to have the front of his road right in front of his residence completely chip sealed, and it looks beautiful. And I wanted so badly to give him a call and ask him what he thought. But anyway, yeah, I'm trying to stay out of it, but it was kind of ironic. And I wanted to tell him you're welcome, because I've known him for quite a few years and kind of get on loggerheads about different issues. So
that's a great story. That's a great story. And
it is so fun.
But regardless of the personality involved, regardless, that's the kind of thing that people don't understand. A lot of people don't understand is that, where does that gravel come from? Where does that chip seal come from? Where does that come from? It comes from from the taxes that we levy ourselves, and a lot of people just don't get that, or the reverse is true. They get their tax bill and they think every dollar goes to the snowplow, and it doesn't. So we got to educate them about that too. So. Well, great, but we do belong to the local Keep It Local coalition, and I did see some of the recent ads, Larry. Are there some more coming out, do you think, or?
They just put out a newsletter today. I haven't had a chance to look at that. I would assume that there will be more ads.
You seen
in
any
the works.
have you seen any polling at all, Larry?
I don't recall the numbers. I haven't looked at the polling for some time.
Okay.
Tom, the one that I had seen, a lot of the measures are really close on all of them.
They are.
So
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know. I didn't I didn't see where it specific was, how they received their information, you know, you do kind of wonder about that, but it was on all the measures that are up for that'll be on the ballot. And most of them were really close. They were they were just a few percentages away from each other. So
Well, anybody that, any public political subdivision, townships and cities, especially, counties, if they really think this thing through with their source of funding, that's where that comes back to my argument about making sure that everybody understands how our finances work and our financing comes from, that you'd think that anybody that's an elected official, township on up, that ought to understand what the effect of this Measure 4 is going to have if it passes on our budgeting and on our finances. So, especially on what I call these smaller groups, the townships and the small cities and the park boards and the fire departments and the library boards, all those that that don't take the lion's share of the tax bill. They really don't, and so I think statistically, I think when you take a look at anybody's tax bill in the country, typically the township's share of a total tax bill is 5-6%. So you think about if you get $1,000 tax bill, $50 goes to the township. You think about it, that's five. That's all it is. So it's we have to educate people as to how that works. So what else you got, Mr. Brandvold, El Presidente? You got anything else? Any other words of wisdom here?
I got in a little late though, Tom, but did you cover anything on gates across them section lines? We've had recent calls on them.
I didn't, but we can talk about that. And we get that question quite a bit. Can we put a gate up across the section line? And that's in other words, you got a section line, and we want a gate across this way. So, can you do that? Yes. You can allow a gate across a section line with permission from the township. Obviously, you're not going to do that on an improved road. Because obviously if it's improved and you're getting gas tax for it, you're saying that that's part of your system. You're not going to do that. But so we're talking about putting gates across those field roads and putting across those unimproved section lines. And you can do that, but there again, the issue is it's a public right of way, and the public has a right to use that right of way. So a gate cannot be locked. Okay, it cannot be locked, so that people can open the gate and get through that. And of course, we always learned if you open a gate, you close it. But get that. Some people aren't very good about that, but hey, if you put a gate across the section lane, you got to deal with the doofuses out there that are going to do that kind of stuff. But yes, you can put a gate across. It can't be locked, and it has to be done with permission, obviously. And that permission then can be taken away at any given time. No such thing as a grandfathered fence, no such thing as a grandfathered gate. Okay, because in the future, we may not want to allow that gate to be there. And then you get stories about guys locking them, and they're putting them in cement and doing all that. Just can't let them do that. Can't let them do that because they have to be made to understand that that's a public right of way. Now that doesn't mean that somebody has a right to open a gate and drive down, but it's public access. I mean, they could walk it, they could be on a snowmobile, they could ride a horse, that kind of thing. But it has to be available for the public. But we can allow gates, and as long as we got permission, and you'd want to do that in writing. Okay. Same thing with fences, we want to do that in writing so that we don't get this grandfathered argument, so that, hey, we gave you permission 3 years ago, and we said in that permission that we may have to ask you to remove it. And we're asking you to remove it now. You have to take it away because we all of a sudden we got more people that want to use it than what we thought. So And sometimes we see those gates as a personality thing. We're mad at the guy down the road and we want to block him so he can't get to his land. And also we get those kind of stupid arguments going on. And you just got to put the stop to that and say, well, I'm just not going to allow that. So, and sometimes those guys will threaten you with, they're going to sue you. Well, have at it, because they have no grounds. They're not going to get anywhere with it because it's a public right of way, and you're saying no. So you're going to win that argument every time. So. What else we got? Anybody else got anything?
Yeah, this is Drew Courtney down here at Oaks.
Hey,
Say we were talking kind of right of ways and ditches and things like that earlier.
yep.
We have our biggest detriment for us down here is water in the ditches, things like that. We can usually work with everybody to move some water, but our hang up is fish and wildlife easements. I was wondering, when all these easements, we got a lot of easements signed back in the 60s. And when these were signed, I don't believe any of that would take jurisdiction into the township right away, correct? It was just giving money to the landowner.
That's right.
So
That's right.
so technically, because we've been talking about how we can move some water, or water's, whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting deal. We understand that, but we work together really well down here, and we'll have the right outlets and downstream, and I'm well aware of all that. We were talking about putting some inlets in the ditch and actually just running some drain tile in the ditch and then cleaning it back up, no problem. Is that something, if we start doing that, if there's fish and wildlife easements on each side of the road, and we just start moving our own water out of our own ditch, is that okay to do?
You're talking about moving water that's presently in the ditch. You're not taking it from some field somewhere, are you? It's
Well,
water that's in the ditch.
you usually know how lateral effect works. It's
Yeah.
not just usually stays in the ditch. I mean,
Right,
it's, I guess
but you're talking about moving water that's presently in the ditch.
Yep, the presently
Yeah.
in the ditch, and I mean, is it our fault if it comes off the field into the ditch? Well, I don't know. The road's been there since there was
Yeah, right.
mucked up in the 50s, and all these easements were signed in the 60s. So
Yeah, yeah.
they
Well,
already knew what they were getting into, type deal.
and you think you have a fairly decent relationship with your fish and wildlife, or is it Game and Fish or U.S. Fish? It's U.S. Fish and Wildlife.
U.S. Fish and Wildlife. Yeah,
You
sorry,
have a fairly
I just
good,
said that.
fairly good relationship with your district guy, or not?
Yeah, everybody does.
No, that's good. Because
No, it's not bad. I mean, there'll be communication there for sure, but obviously their easiest answer on all of this is no.
yeah,
And who's ever going to try to stand up Little Hudson Township against U.S. government when they show up with knives and guns, and here you are, and all you're trying to do is save your roads.
well,
So
and you're going to win that. You're going to win that all the time because you're going to wrap the flag of public safety around yourself. So
okay,
those roads are your obligation. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if there's a fish and wildlife or game and fish. It doesn't matter what's going on out beyond your 33 feet. You have that 66-foot strip is your obligation, and if
okay.
I'm assuming you're talking about a decent, good improved road is what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's a highly traveled road, but we
Yeah,
guys got water right on the ditches, and there's no,
yeah.
we
And
have outlets. It's going to take about a 10-foot overcut. We can put a pipe in, bury it under, and nobody will know it's there, and the water's gone, and we save the public roadway.
where's the water going to go?
We have outlets somewhere it can go. It's just got to jump. We're in a pothole region, so it can go from one to one. And yeah, we're aware of 1 mile downstream notifications, and if it's staying in the ditch and not going on to other.
Where's it going to go into another slough, or going to go in a river someplace, or where's it end up?
There's multiple projects that we're looking at. It could be a combination of both.
Because pumping water. I mean, you can do what you need to do to get water out of your road ditch. The problem is where is it going to go? And
Yep.
so if you get the outlet side, squared away, either it's going to go into a river or it's going to go into if it's going to go into another slough, of course, then now we're outside of our 33 feet, then you got to deal with that. So, they can't say no to you working in your ditch, but they can
Okay.
say no to putting water into some other place that's off your right of way, that, because then you got to deal with, like you doesn't matter if you're taking water from a ditch and putting it off the right of way, it doesn't matter who owns that, where that is, you gotta get permission from that party, you know? And so I suppose they could probably say, no, we don't want that water going over here to this slough over here because that's part of our lease, part of our easement, uh, but you have, so it's, you're kind of, you win the battle and lose the war. You have the right to deal in your ditch. You have the right to do what you need to do, but problem is, where's the water gonna go, you know, so.
So one example that we have is a neighboring farmer drain tiled his field and put an outlet or an inlet right next to one of the culverts, so it'll pick the water up as it crosses and goes into his tile system, and it's gone, and it helps us save our road tremendously. And if we can get, if we can get that, say, make that cut and put a pipe in our right of way, it'll get over to the culvert and it'll flow into the farmer's drain tile and it'll be gone. And he gave us full permission to do something like that.
Where does a farmer's drain tile, where does that outlet at? Where does that
It
go?
all it ends in a creek. That's all downstream right away. That's all taken care of.
Goes into a natural drain.
Natural drain, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, then, yeah, there again, I mean, there you have an outlet. You have an outlet in a natural drain, of course, by definition, is that's where the water's supposed to go. So,
Sure.
creek or a river or whatever, but when you're moving it into some standing place, and that's always that gives you trouble sometimes. But as long as you can get that water to move and get into a natural drain, that's where the water would go anyway, but for the road probably. And so, then I think you're okay. And official, they can't deal with you. They can't say no because you're working in your ditch, okay? And you got permission from the adjacent landowner, so you should be good there too, I would think. So, don't get, you don't want to get bound up with these, because sometimes these fish and wildlife guys, they'll say no just because they can, but they don't have any jurisdiction over your roads. You do, and that's something that got to educate these guys sometimes to that, because they think just because they got an easement on both sides, they think they also own the road. No, they don't. They don't. Having said that, there could be some easements way back when, maybe where the township maybe might have given up jurisdiction for that section line. They might have done that, but that would be a case by case basis, and you'd have to look at the original easement to see that. Because I could see you say maybe there might have been a section line that was maybe underwater even at that time, and so they got an easement from the two adjacent landowners, and they also got an easement from the township at that time because the section line was underwater anyway. So you could have one of those kind of situations, but that would be fairly rare, I think. Few and far between, but that could possibly happen, but it doesn't sound like that's what you got there, so.
No, because what I'm thinking is when Senator Kramer came out and he labeled all the wetland. I don't know if you're familiar with this anyways, and you had to label all the wetlands across. This is like 2 years ago. Anyway, we didn't, as a township, we never got any of that notification because they don't own any of our right of way stuff. So I think
Well, wetlands, according,
I think you're right. So the biggest thing is as long as we have an outlet for it to get away, or I mean, because I understand downstream and you got 1 mile permission. We do a lot of water conveyance on our farm. And I think this legislative session, you're going to see a lot of conveyance things coming about, because that's the biggest issue with most of this stuff. A ditch is easy, but you got to worry about safety and things like that too. But if anybody that wants to move water and you can put a pipe in the ground, usually not, and everybody gets along, it works out way better.
Yeah. And it does. And then the thing about that is, as long as you can get an outlet, that's, as long as it doesn't pool up someplace else, so you get rid of your problem and it ends up causing a problem for somebody else because it's pooling up down there. As long as you can keep that water,
Yeah.
that's the trick, so. And talking about legislation, that might be, something to visit with Larry about, and maybe they, and come, and here's my commercial, Mr. President, come to the state convention, and talk about it, because that's where we can get some resolutions made to propose some legislation. And maybe if there's some things that that is coming up, maybe from the water side, you could maybe maybe you could help out here and let us know, because we're at the legislature as well, and so we need to be, if there's some water laws coming, we need to be aware of them, and we need to work side by side on that stuff.
Yep. Perfect. Yeah, no, that was my question. And I guess it'd probably be about the same with like NRCS wetland because we're not farming it. That's just that has to do with
Yeah,
farmland. So it'd be
NRCS, of course, they, with their jurisdiction is over producers.
yep.
And townships are not producers, so, and I've run into that before, where a farmer is gonna do some ditching and does some stuff in the township ditch without permission. Well, and all of a sudden you kind of leave the township hanging there because, the township should be given some permit, but the NRCS can't tell a township they can't be doing some work in their township ditch because the township's not a producer. Got to be a little careful though. Why is a township working in a ditch with water? And you gave me the right answer because you're trying to protect the road. As soon as you say we're manipulating the township ditch because we want to drain some farmland for the guy up front, now we're in the drainage business and that's not our business. We're protecting the road. Now, if it happens, obviously you're going to be moving water, so you are draining, but your primary purpose, your only purpose is for protection of the road, and that's you win that argument all the time.
Sure. And then as soon as, then lateral effect wouldn't really matter to us because we're just, working in our ditch and that's just what happens type deal.
Right. Yeah. I think I followed you in most of what you're doing there, but yeah, it sounds like you're on the right track. So you bet.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet. We got anything else that anybody wants to talk about here, or we're kind of in no specific topics, no specific thing to talk about here, but it's Township Tuesday, so it's your Tuesday. So
That was a good point that you brought up, Tom, about the annual meeting. For those listening, mark it on your calendar, December 2nd and 3rd at the Ramada in Bismarck. And sure would like to see everybody there, wouldn't we, Tom?
Yes, we would.
Yeah.
And we're the township officers are notorious about not coming, and I don't know why. Because it's a good session. We do some workshops. They usually put me on the podium for a while, so we do this kind of thing, and some questions and answers, and we usually get some pretty good speakers. I don't know if there's anybody that's confirmed yet who's coming, but we got invitations out to a lot of public officials, and of course it's a regular convention, so we have elections. We got a couple of district directors that are up for re-election or election, and resolutions because we're getting prepped up for the next legislative session. So we'll talk about that. That date is also opening days of the legislature too, right? Lee, it's what do they call that when those dudes show up and get sworn in and get their desk? What do they call that?
Yeah, it's the pre-session.
Pre-session. There we go. Yeah. So
Yeah, that's when they elect the leadership and all that good stuff.
yeah, so so we're there when they're there, so we have an opportunity to maybe meet up with them in the hallway and twist their arm a little bit. So it's a and so we get some good stuff. Mary, I expect to see you. You're so far away. You're what, 2 miles maybe?
About 6.
About 6. Okay, so we expect to see you there. So,
I'll
but
be
these
there.
other dudes, of course, they can and the township ought to be paying for your expenses. It's official business, so the township should pay for a hotel room and some mileage and some meals and some other, because that's that. And I always say, if I was an absentee landowner in your township, I would expect my supervisors and my officers to go to that because it's training in education. So I would expect you to go to that, and I would wonder why you're not, because anytime you can get together with some other township officers and talk business and learn a few things, that's not bad. That is not bad, not a bad deal. Barb, what are you up to? You're muted there, kid.
This is not gonna talk.
There you go.
Well, I had a heck of a time getting on because I had the wrong computer to begin with. So the other one doesn't have a camera. But
Hmm. Anything on the state, anything from the state treasurer's desk?
not really. Dues have come in pretty well this year, and um the board needs to be getting their end of the year stuff in, and um
Mailing list issues at all?
well, I don't know if it's an issue, but the thing, well, it is an issue because when we get those lists back from the printers, they say these are bad addresses, and I call the people and they say, well, that's my address. So then when I talk to the post office people, they say, oh, well, maybe there's a dot in the wrong place, or maybe there's a space in the wrong place, or
Good grief, good
and
grief.
so that's what it is. And usually when I mail it out, not always, but when I mail it out with a handwritten address on it, it goes through. So I'm dealing with that kind of.
Hmm.
And there's other things like they say that the place is vacant and it's not. And I mean, there's just a lot of things going on with the post office that make it not very user friendly right now. But you just keep doing it.
Sure. Anybody else got anything they want to visit about? I don't know what time we're gonna quit here, but I see it's 9:15, but anybody else got anything? God, silence descends upon the group here, so. I don't know about topics for next time, like I say, this is kind of our first couple of times we're doing this. I think this is our third month, so we're still kind of learning this, but I guess our format's been, put on a little bit of a presentation tonight. I talked about roads and right of ways, and I think we talked about zoning last month, and so and then just opening it up for questions, and so I guess that's kind of our format. So if anybody's got any topics that you'd like to have Larry or Lee or myself talk about, let us know and we can kind of get some stuff together. I know this election is kind of looming on the horizon for all of us. We're going to kind of wonder what's going to happen here, but with that tax thing, that could be, that could be game changer. It really could be for everybody. And if it passes, it passes. I guess we'll have to deal with it. But and I guess even if it doesn't, then maybe hopefully the people maybe will rethink about how we go about raising money in the state. So how we go about doing that. So
I have a question.
yes,
Today I was listening to the radio, and of course KFYR in the afternoon, they are adamantly they're adamantly for it. And they just constantly hammering, saying that the people that are against it are not telling the truth. And there's people that call in that are on the fence, and then by the time he gets done with them, then usually they say, well, I was on the fence and I jumped off or whatever. And I haven't listened every day, of course, but I wondered if there was anybody calling in. He said he likes the ads put on there from Keep It Local, because he said, then I know what they're up to. So I wondered if there was anybody that has called in or talked to them.
and that sounds like that'd be a Larry question. You're on, Larry. Have we
I
got
don't-
anybody that's countering some of these things or?
I believe they are doing some of that. Like I said, the newsletter just came out as to what's been happening lately. I haven't had a chance to review that.
And like
Yeah,
I say,
but-
I haven't listened to it every day, but every time I've listened, there's uh, strong proponents of it. And there's not that many that I hear that are saying, well, what's the matter with you? You know, how do you know, how are you going to make your roads and stuff? They don't mention townships very often.
Does the, Larry, does it keep it local coalition to is there somebody that's kind of the spokesperson or someone that can, that has been, that's gonna be maybe doing some of those radio types of things, do you know?
Um, well, I know Bob Harms and Chad Oban have been doing a lot of work. I don't know particularly who's doing radio work.
Well, maybe you need to pass that on to those two and just say that, you know, we were hearing that there's some radio shows that are maybe not carrying both sides, and so maybe they would be volunteer to make some calls and get on the show. Maybe they could do that. So
Yeah, that would might help.
yeah, yeah. In the eastern part of the state, I don't know. I don't listen to much of that stuff anymore, but I don't know if anybody else has, but you know, there are some talk show guys on the east, you know, in the eastern radio stations. I don't know if they've been carrying some of that stuff or not, but I imagine now from here on, we're 4 weeks out from the night from today, so I suppose it's going to start getting hotter and heavier on some of these things.
Well, and they talk about the keep it local group being dishonest and that type of thing, but what they're telling people isn't really factual either. You know, like where the money's gonna come from when you run out from
Mm-hmm.
what you get from this year, you know.
Yeah, well,
They're
yeah.
not being forthright about that either.
Well, maybe somebody from the keep it local folks can get can get on the horn and maybe try to counter some of that stuff. I guess that's the only way. It's all you can do really is to do that. So is to hit them with the facts, and but you got to get on, you know, those radio shows. You got to get on them and do that. So
The one
And
thing
they don't bring up things like you know, the out of state people that pay taxes. They don't bring that up very often, and except till today, they talked about, was it Nelson County? They said there was 82% of it was paid from out of state landowners. Well, that was the top 3 landowners, and then they made a big deal out of that. So I didn't read that article, so I don't know really what it said, but
and that is, you know, that is every township has out of state have out of state people that pay taxes. Yeah, we all do. So Mary, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say, I told someone the other day that maybe not this winter, but maybe the winter of 25, 26, if this goes into effect and you are having heart issues, if you can get an EMT that is being paid, hopefully they can get to your house, because there was a blizzard and we didn't have enough money to plow your road. So, you know, think about it. You need EMTs, you need the fire and rescue, and you also need them to be able to get to your house. And one of those things is having good roads and having clear roads. And somebody said to me, well, our government pays for that.
Yeah.
And that's where we're at. I think people don't really understand how our society works and where the money comes from, and you put some money in and then you'll benefit from that eventually, and your neighbor will benefit from that. And I don't know, where do you go with that when somebody says that? Well, our
Yeah,
government,
and our government, of course, includes cities and townships and all those. You know, our government is this big thing that nobody knows it, but we are government too as well. You know, so
We the people.
they don't
That's
get
right.
that. They don't get that. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't,
My impression of this whole thing is that the backers of this, they're frustrated with the big tax bills and the money that goes to the schools and counties and big cities. I think that's where the frustration comes. I'm not convinced that they understand or realize that small kids, we get money too, you know, townships in the city, the small cities, and like I say, the park boards and the fire departments and the ambulance, you know, all us small guys, we get some of that money. I don't think they realize that. So I know their frustration is with the ones that are pulling most of the dollars out, and schools is probably the big one. And I think that's where that frustration is coming from, and they don't see the big picture. They don't see the big picture. Topic, you know, what do we need to do? I know, Mary, you're the clerk, aren't you? You're the clerk, and so is Julie. No, you're not. Are you still the clerk, Julie? Or are you the chairman now? You're okay. You are okay. I don't know who else we got for clerks on here, but what could we do in another month for Township Tuesday? What could we do about for clerks? What kind of topics would you clerks like to see us talk about? And I'll be the first to say, I'm probably not gonna say much because I don't know beans about clerks, so. What would be good topics we could talk about from a clerk standpoint? Julie, what do you think?
I don't know. A lot of people have questions about the ATLR program. I suppose we could talk about that.
Okay,
Um,
okay,
You know, a lot of people have questions about budgets. Nobody knows about a budget. And like you talked earlier, the clerk and treasurer do the budget, you know. Your supervisors a lot of times don't really have a clue. So it might be something good just to talk about a budget, you know.
okay, okay.
So
Mary, what do you think about clerks? What would be clerk topics?
well, I have with our budget last year or earlier in the year, early this spring, I met with our clerk and our treasurer to put together the budget and to see how it all worked and make sure I understood it and understood the costs and all of that. I think it's something everybody needs to know for sure, and where the money comes from, how you think about the budget for next year and the year after that. And I'm already thinking about that and how we can do some road improvements we have a little bit of extra money, and how we can start planning for years ahead instead of just looking at right now. And I think you're always having to look ahead. So I think it would be a good topic. It's just what exactly we could cover, if it would be really broad so that everybody could relate to it, or if we'd cover it in different ways.
Okay, well, that's good, some good thoughts. Any other clerks out there? That are on the line? Barb, I thought you were the chairman, Barb. I thought you were the supervisor.
No.
So
I'm a
what's your,
chair.
you are a chair, okay, I'm sorry about that, I messed that up. So, Barb, Mary, if you're the chairman of the supervisors, you're not supposed to know any of that stuff, so.
I'm a real worrier. I was
Yeah, but-
very, very worried with my first budget. I felt like I had a lot of responsibility, and I had to talk about it. And at our annual meeting, and I thought, I've got to be able to sound like I know what I'm talking about. So I tried.
Sure. Barb, what are you gonna say, Barb?
Well, I think Mary pretty well covered a lot of the issues of the people not knowing where the money comes from, not paying attention. And when it comes time to do the budget, I've done the budget for years. And then the board comes along and looks at it and says, okay, we gotta move this or move that or whatever. And there's a couple of years when I tried to get them to do it, and it was colossal. So then I went back to doing it myself, and then they come along, and I think they are learning. I mean, I think they are figuring it out, because I left a few things hanging out there so that they had to before we,
Oh, that's good,
actually
yeah.
cast our budget. But
Well, so maybe if we do some budgeting talk and some of that, and then maybe it'll rub off on some folks, so.
It seemed, it's hard to explain mill levies too, and to understand it in a way that you can go to the annual meeting too, and to be able to describe exactly why we have it and how it's calculated. And so that when they go to vote, they really understand it. They just don't a lot of people don't want to admit they don't understand it. And when I started, I didn't understand mill levies. And I've really worked hard to try to understand how it works. And it is complex. It's not just basic math sometimes. So,
Yeah, but it is, all it is percentages is really what it
right.
is, and it's if you can understand 1/10 of a percent, should be able to understand mills, that's really what all it is. And so,
Right.
yeah, it sometimes I think people maybe make it harder than it needs to be too, because it is, it is in some respects, some basic math, it really is, but sometimes it make it a little tough. Any other
they have to
quirks?
know what the percentage is
Yeah.
of,
Yeah,
some of them
yeah.
don't even know what the dollar amount, I mean, they don't need to know the dollar amount, but what that percentage is of.
Mhm.
And I think it is bugabooed. I mean, I do think it is, because I have taken a whiteboard and drawn it out on a whiteboard and showed them how we arrived at it, and then some people would say, oh, and maybe I should do that every year. I don't know.
Yeah, probably. Or maybe we should make up some sheets, too,
Could.
with some examples. Oh, yeah, yeah.
That's what I have done for the annual meeting too, is just rudimentary printouts right off of Google, and just to get them started on where you're at, and to not be afraid of a small increase because it is a small amount. I actually met with our assessor for like 4 hours. He was so patient, and just we went over everything and how it all works and how the assessments work, and it may be a little bit busier in Hay Creek, but that helped me a lot, because I feel like if we don't have our residents or constituents understanding why they might have to pay a little more, it's pretty hard to get them to agree to it.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. I
Kind of
can
like
see
Measure
that.
4 not being a good idea, in my
Mhm.
opinion.
Yeah, right, right, right.
Well, I was
Uh,
really surprised. I was waiting for an appointment, and I started doing a game on my phone, and 3 times an ad in favor of number 4 was on there.
really?
Yeah.
Well, they must have some money, so they must be doing some advertising. It's 9:30, so I suppose we gotta knock it off here. Anybody got anything else before we go? Larry, anything else?
Well, I was just
Good.
gonna say, we're looking at having a mock annual meeting as part of our education during the convention this time. So,
Fantastic.
yeah,
Okay.
you just might be someone that wins a card with a role to play there, Mary.
Oh.
All right.
Learn to be quiet.
Lee, you had something you want to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I've seen 2 debates so far on Measure 4. One was on open range and the other was on the Dakotan. And Bob Harms was on both of them. Am I pronouncing that right, Larry?
Yep.
That's
Okay.
right.
And then Rick Becker. And Bob did an awesome job. He brings up townships and talks about townships all the time. Rick does not. He will mention a township maybe once during his debate, but it was good information on that if anybody had the chance to catch them. And I believe there's others that are coming up, but I don't know the dates on them.
Well, maybe we should try to find out when those are, and we could get them, get a schedule published out there, so
Yep.
people.
But that Bob, if that to have somebody or check on somebody to, if he's got contacts with the radio somehow. Yeah, he does an excellent job for us, so.
Yeah, Bob was a year ahead of me in school, so I've known him for a long time, so. Yeah.
Oh.
I know there's a recording too on Prairie Public from last week, I believe. I haven't heard it yet, but I saw somebody had posted a link or something on Facebook, and it sounded like it was pro and con, but it sounds like it was done well. I've been trying to listen to it, but maybe tomorrow.
Yeah, I felt both of them, the two that I had listened to, I thought they both were well done. Yeah. I thought there was some good information on that. So if people tuned in and had the opportunity to listen to it, so
Right.
that's about all I've got, Tom.
Good. Well, I think it's time to, yeah, we've been at it for an hour and a half, so it's probably time to quit. We always want to leave people, leave them wanting more, that's what you always want to do on stage, so
Well,
it's time to do that.
Like you had mentioned earlier, if someone out there does have ideas for these, please send them to us.
Yeah.
Our emails are on our website, and just drop us an email and give us some ideas so we can continue these for a while here. So,
And I imagine then the next, the November Tuesday is gonna be election night, isn't it, Larry?
Oh, God. Susan.
I bet it is.
The second Tuesday. Yeah.
Yeah, so is that second? No.
No, first Tuesday.
Yeah, so is this the first Tuesday? This is the second Tuesday, right? So the second Tuesday in November is not election night, is it?
No,
is-
no, the election night is the 5th of November.
Yeah, so our next time would be the 12th then, probably, yeah, okay. Okay, so then we'll know what
Right.
happens. We'll know what happens, so.
Yes.
Well, good. I'm gonna quit, folks. I see my batteries are running down, so I gotta quit anyway, so we'll
Yeah.
leave and we'll see everybody down the road somewhere. So thanks
Okay, good
again.
night.
Yep.
Good night.
thanks
Thank
everyone
you.
for attending.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Thank you all for participating tonight. We hope this program will grow, and please send us your ideas for topics. Have a good night. Stay safe. It's still big fire danger out there. Hope that everybody can make it through this okay. So have a good night.